I think some of you have been waiting for this review for a very, very long time. Now, the day has come. Congratulations! Your patience has been rewarded. I had a thoroughly good time with this episode. Not a single reference to the series arc. It is as contained as you can possibly get. There's also something very effective about the title of the episode itself. Amy is notoriously the girl who has to wait for the Doctor, not just in this episode, but throughout her time as a companion. The whole idea of people waiting for the Doctor isn't entirely new. Sarah Jane Smith reunited with the Doctor 30 years after leaving her in his fourth incarnation. Even the girl in the fireplace was a girl who waited. Most significantly, this notion plays out in the 11th hour, but even as recently as the wait between the episodes A Good Man Goes to War and Let's Kill Hitler, Amy and Rory wait a whole summer, like the audience, to find out what happened to Melody Pond. Even then, though, it wasn't exactly clear what the Doctor had been up to whilst the pair were waiting. This episode was the first for director Nick Hurren, who would go on to direct The God Complex, Asylum of the Daleks, the 50th anniversary episode, and the married couple's final episode, The Angels Take Manhattan. I'm anticipating goodness from these future episodes, as this guy knocked it out of the park when it came to directing The Girl Who Waited. It's largely down to the framing, cinematography, transitions, and performances that are most commendable, but I'll talk about the specifics as we comb through the episode. I thought I'd also bring your attention to Tom McRae, the guy who wrote this episode, who also does a cracking job with a whacking good script. He previously penned the Cybermen two-parter back in Series 2, and if Wikipedia is anything to go by, apparently he had free reign to write the story he wanted for this episode slot. All this and more will come shortly after a quick word from this video's sponsor. Atlas VPN is a tool that encrypts your data and hides your virtual location. This means you can browse the internet as though you were in another country. But why would you want to do that, Harry, I hear you ask? Well, you might already know that Netflix libraries vary from country to country, and BBC iPlayer is exclusively available in the UK. Unless you have a VPN, of course. Atlas VPN works on Windows, Android, iOS, and macOS. They are currently running a 3-year deal that comes to just £1.04 a month. For security over public Wi-Fi and access to so much additional content, an extra £1 a month is an absolute bargain. Another great reason to check out Atlas VPN is that they have a 30-day money-back guarantee too. If you want to take advantage of this offer, you can click my affiliate link down in the description below. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the review. The episode gets off to a great start by taking our characters to an intergalactic tourism hotspot. The idea that Appalachia would be voted second best only to the planet of the coffee shops had me smiling in seconds. That joke has aged excellently. Before entering though, Amy needs to grab her get-out-of-jail-free device, her mobile phone. It led to a rather cringy joke about Twitter that would be just as ill-placed in a modern episode too.
I bring you to a paradise planet 2 billion light years from Earth, and you want to update Twitter.
Ahaha, social media is a thing. The men then wandered into a room by pressing the green button. I firstly loved the simplistic design of these sets, but also the elevator-like appearance of moving from one little set to another. Generally, when you call an elevator, it doesn't matter which button you press. You input up or down when inside the lift itself. Hence why Rory saying, "Push the button! Push the button!" shows the human novelty of calling an elevator despite the two buttons leading to two different places. I presume the naming of these buttons indicates the relative speed at which these two time streams operate at. Anchoring would indicate a pulling of the brakes, keeping your existence paced as normal. A waterfall, however, indicates a significant drop, hurtling at dangerous speeds until you crash at the bottom. Amy's bottom turns out to be 36 years of isolation. This whole opening sequence has the same creepy wooden chime sound effects the score provided in The Doctor's Wife, once again adding a chilling, surreal atmosphere to the episode. A robot then entered the men's room and we're led into a rather awkward title sequence segue. It felt like it was put here out of necessity, and I think it would have been preferable having this placed rather late in the episode. Perhaps it could have been shown when older Amy shows up for the first time, just to throw us off the familiarity we're accustomed to. Or maybe I've just been watching too much Invincible lately. It just felt weird seeing the episode essentially hit the pause button here, only to press play right afterwards when there wasn't really much of a threat to begin with. I very much liked the idea of the Doctor being entirely separated from the gang for the most part in the episode. episode. By establishing the idea of Chen 7 being a disease that only the Doctor can catch, it raises the stakes by limiting him to the TARDIS. I found this episode utilised handheld camera movements and long takes to impressive effect. I was particularly amazed by how they managed to get Arthur Darvill from the green room to the red room and then the green room again totally seamlessly. The Doctor then pulls out the oversized magnifying glass for one of the coolest looking props the show has ever seen to keep Amy in check.
What are you doing?
Blocking it onto Amy. Small act of vandalism, no one mind. Ah, that'll be the small act of vandalism alarm.
And look at that, I'm still smiling. The robots of the facility become the main oppositional force of the episode, and I think they're pretty damn awesome in concept and design. Wait, is that a Dalek laser in the middle? I think the best thing about them though is that they're not necessarily bad robots, it's just their medicine is incompatible with humans, potentially. Their catchphrase,
"This is a kindness,"
seems to match up with the old adage, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Amy is then seen running around various locations. They aren't what I'd call descriptive, but it certainly shows the size of this facility above all else. From simple offices to steamy basements, and of course the wonderful white rooms that act as gateways between the locations. Finally, the shot of that gorgeous garden Amy finds herself in is absolutely breathtaking. I got shivers all up my back when watching this for the first time. Sure, the top half of the image might look a bit dated, but the sight of these alien bushes gives the oh my god, alien bushes. The sight of these alien bushes give the episode a small break from the action. This relief ties into the idea of people living out the remainder of their days. As Amy rightfully says,
"You really could spend a lifetime here."
Sadly, this relief doesn't last long though, as the robots appear again after Amy has a chat with this light coming from the ceiling. The aesthetics of the light on Amy's face look kinda poo, and it might have been nicer to have some wide shots with an echoey voiceover instead. Am I actually advocating for a cheaper solution here? What budget? I can't even anymore. Annoyingly, Amy managed to get out of a predicament by standing in a lit vent of some kind, not exactly an obvious choice for somebody on the run to begin with. So what do these engine vents do exactly?
The vents channel the exhaust fumes from the temporal engines that hold the multiple time streams in place.
They are apparently located in the arrivals segment she ran past earlier. This displays her running through a huge chunk of the facility without any resistance from the robots previously seen. They just cut to her going exactly where she needs to be. In spite of all this, Murray Gold.
Take a tape recorder and record yourself playing the piano, and then you play it back and you take another recorder and you record everything, suddenly bashing some spoons.
The pieces he's written for the chasers in this episode are absolutely golden. Also, I really liked these transitions of time flying by on the TARDIS console, mashed up with Amy stuck in the red waterfall. It illustrates time going by at supersonic speeds, whilst making for a great precursor to Amy's older self being revealed later on. With the Doctor locking onto Amy with the magnifying glass, Rory finds a statue that I swear is also seen in the Black Lodge from the series Twin Peaks. In the midst of this rather creepy visualization of all the people living hyperfast time streams, a late 50s Amy comes along with a rather strange voice effect.
I waited for you. I waited.
The decision to have Gillan performing the role instead of an older actress was thoroughly commendable. Her deeper voice, plodding feet, hunched back, and the makeup too makes the whole affair convincing and shocking. The attention to detail in the costume is pretty amazing too, but I think it was a shame they didn't grey up her hair or anything. It's the two guys displaying remorse over this encounter that drives the emotion of the scene. I did like that she became this savage fighter fending off the robots, but it's her technological, "I made a sonic screwdriver out of my phone" thing that kinda irked me. If she had a bit more insanity to her characterization, I could have been a bit more forgiving if, say, she tried convincing us that her phone turned into a sonic screwdriver and when she tried using it, it simply didn't work. I suppose they didn't want it to be too similar to the Doctor's wife, wherein Rory was also seen getting older and older until his death, with the ensuing insanity that would naturally follow. Rory was then seen sitting in older Amy's hideout with Robot Rory, a nice nod to Robert Zemeckis' film Castaway. I did really like one aspect of Amy's characterization, that of hating the Doctor. She cannot be allowed to get anywhere near the Doctor for this very reason, and ties neatly into the whole quarantine idea, as well as the Doctor slamming the door in her face at the end. The pair then returned to the garden where she talked with the interface. As much as there's more dribble about the previously mentioned engines, I really liked this moment the pair shared. shared, reminding me that there is in fact a relationship that's been built up between the two. Her not laughing for 36 years is just heart-crushing, and the score makes this moment all the more lovelier. Had they focused more on her insanity that I mentioned previously though, this idea might not have been as successfully executed. The cherry on the cake of emotion though is that Rory can't really be around her knowing he might not end up growing old with her. He can't even help with the whole engines thing either.
I'll just leave you two geniuses alone. I'll be back in a minute.
It gives him reason to be resentful and leads beautifully into this scene of arguing over which Amy he will choose to keep. I was surprised to learn that Rory's Choice was not a working title for this episode at any point during pre-production. His outburst here was so commendable.
You should look in a history book once in a while, see if there's an outbreak of plague or not.
That is not how I travel.
Then I do not want to travel with you!
More for Darville's performance than anything else, but also the multiple emotions we would be feeling about the Doctor at this point in the story. He really did mess up big time here, yet he is still doing what he can to put things right. It's these kinds of moments in the show that make it so memorable and enjoyable. The gang then found young Amy in order to convince her older self to help them out. Older Amy has gained meaning from her long period of time in pure survival mode, making her so stubborn with every shred of love and joy stripped away from her. Once again, the immaculate filming of this episode gives the scene weight. This two-shot overlay allows us to see older Amy looking like she's watching an old VHS tape of her younger self, whilst the younger self in turn is dumbfounded by seeing her future self. Even the pair reminiscing about Rory's hair at one point in his life fits in with the idea of the past saving the future. It once again reinforces the pair's relationship, and it's such a shame that this series often seems to neglect this aspect of the trio's dynamic. Sometimes they're like two pathetic teenagers, and yet other times, like this, they do actually feel like a married couple, committed to each other above all else. This whole romantic idea might sustain older Amy's commitment to the cause, but her fervently pressuring Rory to ensure a paradox takes place adds another layer of tension beneath their escape. They do have a waffly means of getting young Amy into their time stream though. Something about regulators, coloured cables, and the most half-assed dancing to the Macarena I've ever seen. Oddly enough, this isn't actually the first time Amy has bumped into herself in the show. She originally played two of herself in the Space and Time Red Nose Day specials, where the TARDIS materializes inside itself. It's actually really funny, escalates really well, and I loved it. Admittedly, the two Amys synchronizing up their speech was rather amusing, but then I realized Rory was still wearing the glasses despite throwing them on the ground earlier. I thought it was a shame Rory doing this didn't cut off their communication with the Doctor there and then, leaving room for potential regret over his angry actions. More amusing dialogue was exchanged as the trio ran back to the TARDIS. Them entertaining the idea of there being two Amys in the universe makes the separation of the two later all the more heartbreaking. Unfortunately, I found the slow motion escape sequence to be a little underwhelming. Slow motion isn't really my cup of tea to begin with, but also for every slice with the katana there seemed to be a kick or a whack with her stick that made the robots barely seem like a threat at all. I know that's kind of the point with Amy being trained to survive for 36 years, but it's more the contrast between seeing this
System engaged.
and this that made their escape feel a bit too easy. Putting a robot head through Mona Lisa though? My god, that was funny. With the young ones safely in the TARDIS, the Doctor pulls a fast one on older Amy, fully admitting to lying in order to prevent a wibbly-wobbly catastrophe. What's even more fascinating is that the Doctor still gives Rory the choice of leaving her or letting her in. The return of Rory's choice is just brilliant, knowing that truly he doesn't have one.
This isn't fair. You're turning me into you.
That bit was absolutely mega. Time is still in flux at this point, hence why older Amy can still be heard banging on the TARDIS doors instead of just blinking out of existence. Such iconic imagery is displayed with the silhouette of older Amy's hand on a TARDIS pane of glass. It allows for a truly dramatic ending with some excellent dialogue shared between the two in this incredible two-shot. Have we ever seen a shot like this where two people are physically separated by the TARDIS door? doors? I know it feels quite doomsday-esque, but the fact the pair can hear each other is what drives the emotion of this scene.
When you carried her away, you used to look at me like that. I'd forgotten how much you loved me. I'd forgotten how much I loved being her. Amy Pond in the TARDIS with Rory Williams.
It's such a cruel dilemma, and once again visually represented by having older Amy faded out to show Rory saying, "I'm so sorry." Oh, the feels! This idea of a time traveler doing the right thing is so excellently executed in this story. At this point in the story, we had a rather unnecessary farewell segment with older Amy having the robots closing in on her. She talks to the light in the ceiling that I'd totally forgotten about by this point and asks to see Earth? What? Honestly, they should have had Rory making the Doctor travel away as quickly as possible, not wanting to stay for a second longer. Would the trio really have stuck around to hear older Amy meeting her demise? To me, that just seems a bit cruel. The ending scene has the Doctor dodge a question from Rory.
Did you always know it would never work? Saving both Amy's. I promised you I'd save her, and there she is.
And then proceeds to dodge another question from Amy in the most ooh, juicy way.
How are you feeling?
Where is she?
It's such a bittersweet ending. Amy remembered a version of her that technically never existed, and the pair were saved by a character who never technically existed. Even though the gang actively prevented a paradox, one still remains in their minds. So, did it suck? Nah. This is one of those Doctor Who episodes that just has some amazing visuals, not even from CGI, but from the way the camera delivers the story as well as the script. This combination sets this episode apart from most others in this series. It has such a unique concept to it and is thoroughly memorable for the emotion it produces. It's not the perfect episode. If anything, the worst part was the stuff to do with the engines and how the Doctor and Amy will just speak at 1,000 miles an hour so you don't have to think about how exactly they're getting out of this sticky mess. There are some really nice references in here though, the score is magical, and the climax of the story gives Rory the spotlight in the show he deserves. I give The Girl Who Waited an 8 out of 10. I think some of... Can't even get the first line of the video right. Blimey. Got a lot of snotty totty, sorry guys. Indicates the relative speed at which these two time spree... Oh fuck. I was surprised to learn that Rory's... I can never say Rory. Rory is such a weird name. Time is still in flux at this point, hence why older Amy can still be heard banging on the The return of Rory... The return of Rory's Rory... I wonder if people on set had a problem with saying Rory. Maybe they just said it so much that it became natural to them. Right, shut up, Harry, carry on.